Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Andy and today we are looking at something slightly different from the norm that I do on the channel. Today we are actually going to preview the real life new F1 2018 season. It's a season of some slight changes to the regulations which we're going to go through, as well as having a quick review over each of the drivers and teams, and as well at the end I'm going to put across my predictions for the coming season so that come November you can all laugh at me when I get it all wrong. But we're going to start off with some of the changes to the new season, and that's going to start with some of the technical and sporting regulation changes, and I'm going to get it out of the way straight first of all. It's the halo. Yep, it is that thing on top of the car that nobody likes, let's be honest about it. The safety device has been made mandatory for the 2018 season onwards. It's also been adapted by other series as well, like F2. I believe even F3 might be getting involved with it as well, not too sure. But it's divided fans left, right and centre. It's a Marmite piece of technology. But what I will say is, despite not being a big fan of it myself, if it was to prevent the injury to even one driver, then it'll have proven itself to be the right thing to do. I do hope that the teams maybe paint it in the colours of the driver's helmet, because supposedly it is quite difficult to tell the drivers apart due to the halo now, as you can't see the helmet design. But this is something that we will see over the term of the season. One of the other changes is to what's known as trick suspension. This was seen by a couple of teams last year, Ferrari and Red Bull noticeably as well, and it was an extra link added to the suspension, meaning that the ride height could technically be manipulated while going through the corners depending on the angle of the steering. And obviously, being something that the FIA see as being a performance enhancer, if you can call it that, whatever you wish to class, but it's basically been outlawed, which means that it can no longer be used. How that will affect the cars, who knows? Doesn't seem to have affected Ferrari too much for the fastest time in testing, of course, with Sebastian Vettel in Barcelona, but we will see come this weekend in Melbourne. The final obvious change that you may see is the removal of the massive shark fins and the silly little T-wings that used to sit atop those shark fins from last year. Those have been outlawed as well and removed, although some teams still have a little bit there, but it doesn't have the full effect of it as you used to see previously. Now, one of the big talking points from last season was, of course, the grid penalty system. Whenever there was an engine change or an element change to the engine, you could see the likes of Alonso and Van Dorn and the McLarens having 115 place penalties, which technically means that at Silverstone they should have been starting in Newcastle. But this year it's been made different, it's been simplified, and it basically means that if you earn a 15 place penalty, you automatically go to the back of the grid. If more than one driver has 15 or more grid place penalties, then it will be down to the timing of when those changes have been taken. The other one, which is causing quite a bit of controversy, is the engines themselves. So last year each driver got 4 engines or 4 components from engines to last them for a full season. This year it's been reduced to just 3 engines, and with a change to the calendar, meaning that we now have a record 21 races. That is 7 races that each engine has to last. We're not just talking races themselves, we're talking qualifying, we're talking practice. 7 races it's got to last, the equivalent of 7 full weekends. Now, that's obviously going to be a worry. Even Renault already are talking about strategizing this for development, that they might strategise taking penalties later in the year. They're already talking about it. We're not even at round 1. People have already been joking about how many engines Honda will use now that they're in the back of the Toro Rosso, but then testing kind of put that one to bed very quickly. But it'll be interesting to see how it works on that side of things. The final change sporting wise is to the tyres. Instead of having 5 dry tyre compounds, we now have 7, with the try not to snigger at the back of the classroom please super hard tyres, which are going to be orange banded, along with the new for 2018 Hypersoft tyres, which will have the pink banding on them. The Hypersoft is the tyre expected from time to time. It will see places like Monaco, I would imagine, along with maybe another race or two. And then obviously the softest possible, with every tyre compound being made slightly softer than it was last year. Pirelli's hope being that it will mean more tyre stops, more strategy choices. But the teams will only get to choose between 3 tyre compounds each weekend, as normal. Now, I alluded to earlier on as well, 21 races for us to enjoy this season. Huge number of events. We see the return of the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim after a year off, all because Nürburgring can't afford to run the German Grand Prix in its absence. And the return of the French Grand Prix after nearly 10 years since the last French Grand Prix at Magny-Cours. The race circuit returns to Paul Ricard for this season, and that'll be bang slap in the middle of 4 weekends, pretty much simultaneously, back to back to back, which is going to be very fun for the fans indeed, and very tiring, I can imagine, for the teams and the drivers. But those are the changes to the sport and technical regulations in the calendar. Now it's time to have a quick review of the teams themselves. I'll try and keep it brief, but I am known for talking, so bear with me. We'll start off with the champions from last season, AMG Mercedes, with defending 4-time champion Lewis Hamilton in the number 44, being partnered for the second season in the number 77 car by Valtteri Bottas. Now, Mercedes have taken every championship since the hybrid turbo era began in 2014, and many are putting them as being the favourites once again to do so this year. Hamilton will be looking to be a 5-time world champion, tying with Juan Manuel Fangio if he was to do so, and obviously he has been given that favourite for the title tag. Testing times, you wouldn't think so. But what you've got to remember is Mercedes were going on long runs. They weren't looking for outright pace. And that's why their fastest time for the whole 8 days of testing was only 7th fastest out of the teams. Well, Ferrari set the top time in testing with Vettel. But it's going to be a tricky year for the team. There's only so many changes Mercedes can make now. They've developed the car to such an extent that it's surely only going to be minute changes, whereas the other teams have bigger chance of catching up and making for more changes. And it's an interesting season for Bottas. It's that tricky second season at Mercedes. He's on a 1-year deal. Can he prove he's the right man to partner Hamilton from 2019 and beyond? And speaking of Hamilton, it's expected that he'll be signing a new contract very shortly that will make him the highest paid sports person in the world, earning more per year from his contract than Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, Tom Brady, LeBron James, everybody. 40 million a year just from Mercedes, and it's rumoured that he earns upwards of 100 million from his personal sponsors. Brand Hamilton has gone global, as we already know. Moving on now to the Scuderia from Maranello. It is of course Ferrari, back once again with the same driver lineup of Sebastian Vettel in the number 5 and Kimi Räikkönen in the number 7 car. Now, for Ferrari, it's been over 10 years since their last driver's title, despite many attempts with the likes of Alonso, Massa, and including Vettel and Räikkönen over the last number of years. Last season showed signs of improvement. The team were even leading the championship come the summer break, but then it all went to pot with reliability issues. Japan, Malaysia qualifying, of course, and Vettel to start last, and then there was obviously that infamous crash now that took out both of them in Singapore, along with Max Verstappen. Vettel is obviously the best chance likely to be for Ferrari to take the title. He's obviously aiming to be a 5-time champion as well, like Hamilton is trying to do to match Fangio. Well, many expect this to be the retirement season for Kimi Räikkönen, who's now in his late 30s, and it's expected that his contract will not be renewed beyond this season, which could make for a very interesting driver market come the summer, if that is to be the case. We move on to the third team in the running, which is of course Red Bull Racing, powered by a Tag Heuer branded Renault engine. Now, Red Bull for me have probably got the ultimate driving lineup, the best driving lineup combination that there is out there at this time, with Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen. Now obviously Red Bull is still a relatively new team in comparison to the likes of Ferrari, McLaren, Williams, etc. Having only formed around about the mid-2000s, but they're 4 times champions from the turn of the decade, with Vettel in both drivers and constructors. And with the Aussie Ricciardo and the aggressive Dutchman Verstappen, as I say, probably 2 of the hottest drivers on the grid just now. Both are race winners. I am tripping over my tongue, I do apologise, but I record these live and I don't retake. But the likely letdown is going to be that Tag Heuer Renault engine. It's already down on power, in comparison to Mercedes and Ferrari. And the teams obviously was very outspoken about the French manufacturer last season, so will Renault be willing to give them all the engine upgrades, considering they're willing to hang them out to dry when things have gone wrong? But it will be a very interesting dynamic to see, and both drivers, if I remember correctly, are now signed up to long-term contracts at Red Bull. The fourth team then on the grid we're going to look at is the Sahara Force India, powered by the Mercedes engine, with number 11 Sergio Perez of Mexico and the Frenchman in the number 31 Esteban Ocon. Now, Force India have always been good at being the best pound for pound team, so to speak, in terms of how far up the grid they are in comparison to how much or how little in comparison that they spend. They've always been seen as the best of the rest, and have always had their hat resting on that peg, but if testing's anything to go by, which is hard to gauge, that peg is looking a little bit wobbly, to say the least. Obviously last season seen Perez and Ocon explode as well, with a number of incidents, Baku, Spa amongst others, before the team put its foot down. And there's also rumours of a name change as well, which is unsure if that'll still be going ahead now, with the season about to start. But that would obviously bring more investment to the team, but it does also put a certain amount of uncertainty within the Silverstone-based outfit. Can they hold on to 4th place come the end of the year? Well, the next team on the list, Renault Sport F1, might have something to say about that. With Nico Hülkenberg in the number 27 and the El Matador Carlos Sainz in the number 55, the Renault team have one of the stronger driver pairings on the grid, certainly for the midfield teams. Renault have already improved, testing looked encouraging. The engine is expected to see improvements through the year to bring them closer to Ferrari and Mercedes, and it just seems to be that this could be the start of a good revival time for the former world champions, who haven't tasted glory since Alonso's 2 championships back in the mid-2000s. I expect Renault to be the 4th best team come the end of the year. I'm going to call that one right now. Moving on to the next team on the grid is the McLaren Renault. Now, no matter how many times I say that, I cannot get used to it. Okay, simple. I cannot get used to saying McLaren Renault. It just doesn't make sense. But anyway, it is what it is. Now, anyone that's followed me on Twitter will know I broke this story last year, writing for LTM Sport about 3 days before I'd put it out, got a bit of word. It's still rumoured McLaren are going to build their own engines from 2021, but that's never been announced yet. But my sources have told me otherwise, so keep your eyes peeled on that. But for this year, the hell of being with Honda's gone, and it's a new dawn and a new day with Renault power. Or is it? See, testing seen the car break down again and again and again, and it can't be blamed on Honda. And it makes me and others think, is it the McLaren itself? They've always been aggressive with the design. It's always been very tightly packaged at the back. Could this be the problem? Was it McLaren all along, rather than the engine? Obviously with Fernando Alonso in the number 14 car, you have one of the fastest drivers in the grid with one of the most experienced drivers as well. And then you've got the youth of the number 2 car, which has got Stoffel van Dorn, one of the McLaren Young Driver programme drivers, in his second full season with the team. I quite like Van Dorn. I think he's a good, safe pair of hands, but he needs to prove himself a bit more this year to ensure he keeps that seat moving forward. And obviously Alonso this year is competing with Toyota, funnily enough, in the World Endurance Championship as well. So he's running 2 championships as he quests after that triple crown, considering his attempts at Indy last year as he goes for Le Mans in June. How he will cope, we shall see. Moving on to the new home for Honda, Scuderia Toro Rosso, with number 10 Pierre Gasly and a number 28 and defending World Endurance Series champion Brendan Hartley of New Zealand. Now obviously Toro Rosso in the news quite a bit towards the end of last year with the whole Daniel Kvyat scandal, whatever you wish to call it. He was dropped, he was back in, he was dropped again, he was going to be back, and then he was dropped for good. Daniel now finds himself at Ferrari, which, considering his history with Vettel a few years back and being the torpedo, is quite interesting. But everyone's thought, Honda, going to be engine blow-ups, Toro Rosso are going to struggle. Doesn't seem to be so. Testing was actually very, very good for the Toro Rosso team. Some consistent good lap times. They got a lot of running. Toro Rosso's team themselves have even said this is the best pre-season they've had with any manufacturer. That goes back to when they've had Ferrari engines, they've had Renault engines. This season's testing with Honda has been the best they've had, according to some of the team. That's encouraging, and I really do think Toro Rosso might just surprise us this year. Gasly's a good driver. Hartley's proven already. He's a Le Mans winner. He's a defending WEC champion, although he won't be defending it. So they've got a good lineup, and considering expectations are going to be low, I think they might just fly under the radar, and they could prove a few people wrong. I think they might even challenge up towards there with Renault and Force India for the top best of the rest spot. Now we move on next to the American team, which is of course Haas. Haas F1, powered by the Ferrari engine. Now, testing went quite well. You know, Kevin Magnussen set a very respectable time, which is made even more respectable when you realise he was on the super soft tyres. Now, Haas ran on hypersofts, yet Magnussen set their fastest lap on super softs. 2 compounds harder. Even Hamilton has labelled the team's performance as a bit of shock and encouraging. So they've got to take, good from that. You've got Romain Grosjean in the number 8 car. He's a safe pair of hands now. He's got rid of all that past misdemeanours that's seen him getting banned from a race as well. And with Magnussen, he's always been aggressive and never scared to get the elbows out. So could we see the team jump up the grid a little bit more? Who knows? But it's definitely an interesting one to see, and you can see why this midfield battle is extremely interesting to watch. Second to last, we move on to the Williams team, former world champions, powered by Mercedes engines. They got the most inexperienced lineup on the grid, and for me, this rings alarm bells already. Number 18, Lance Stroll from Canada, retains his seat for a second season. He is partnered by the number 35 car of Russian Sergei Sartoykin, and I'll apologise if I pronounced that wrong, because my pronunciation is terrible. The retirement at the second time of asking of Felipe Massa not only means there's no Brazilian on the grid since 1970, which is a stunning stat in itself, but it means that there's no real experience in the driver lineup. Yes, Robert Kubica is the test driver. Yes, he's got experience, but he's been away from F1 properly for a good 6 years now. This is a worry because without that big experience there, how can they develop the car properly? And for former champions and a team I have a bit of a soft spot for, I do worry that this might be a very difficult season. I'm also going to put it out there that Sartoykin comes to F1 with not an amazing record. He's never won F2. He only won 3 or 4 races in the category in 3 seasons. I'm calling it now, unless he hits the ground running within the first half of the season, don't be surprised to see him replaced with Kubica before the season's out. Finally, we move on to Sauber, or as we should call them now, Alfa Romeo Sauber. Yes, the Alfa Romeo brand is back in F1 after a many a year out. And even the livery harks back to the red and white Alfa colours from years gone by. The team has retained obviously the Ferrari engines, getting the upgrade to the most recent one as well, having run 2016 spec Ferrari engines last year. They're now going to get the new 2018 spec engine from this year. They've retained the number 9 Marcus Ericsson, the Swede, in the first seat, and he is joined by the defending Formula 2 champion in the number 16 car, Charles Leclerc. Now, I'm excited personally to see Leclerc in an F1 car. It might be the Sauber, it might be not expected to be at the front, but Leclerc is a talent and a half. He's part of the Ferrari driver programme, part of the reason he got placed at Sauber, of course, with their tie-in to Ferrari engines. But if you've not watched anything from him last year in F2, I highly recommend you YouTube it. Type in Formula 2 Charles Leclerc. He's such a quick driver. He even pitted during a sprint race in Bahrain last year and still won. That's how much he managed to make it work. Just incredible passing, brilliant aggressiveness, but a great racecraft. And I predict big things for Leclerc coming forward, and I'm really excited to see him in F1 finally, after winning F2 last year. But that is the teams and drivers. As I say, we've got 21 races to go through, which is just going to be absolutely fantastic. What do I expect to see? Well, obviously I can't see past either Hamilton or Vettel for the championship. It's one of those two. I can't see it being anyone else personally. Would I love to see someone else win? Absolutely. I'd love to see Ricciardo win. I'd love to see Verstappen win, but he's got plenty of time. But I just can't see past Hamilton or Vettel. They're probably the 2 fastest drivers in the grid, apart from maybe Alonso if you give them the right machinery. I just can't see past them. But my pick to win is, and I'm not a fanboy, but my pick is Lewis Hamilton to pick up his 5th championship and his 2nd in a row for Mercedes once again. But I do think it will be a lot closer this time round. I think Ferrari will be there or thereabout. Red Bull will be knocking on the door as well. I see this being the hardest season Mercedes have had in comparison to other teams challenging since the hybrid turbo era came into effect in 2014. I see Red Bull being closer, but I don't think they're quite there yet. That engine will just hinder them slightly. So I do expect them to be fighting for wins, but I do expect Ferrari and Mercedes to be the top 2. The midfield battle, though, has got to be the most exciting part of this season. We've got Force India, McLaren, Renault, Toro Rosso. I expect all 4 of those teams to be fighting for best of the rest. And it's just going to be a stunning watch to see that midfield battle progress as the years go by. Haas could even get in there if testing has been as fruitful in terms of development as people expected. So that is going to be very, very interesting. The driver dynamic, the team dynamic in there as well. Really looking forward to the midfield battle. Towards the back, Williams and Sauber. I'm going to call it. I'm sorry, because I love the Williams team. I've got a really soft spot for them, but I can see them finishing last this year. Based on what I've seen so far, I am not confident at all. I'm actually worried for the Oxford side. Inexperienced lineup, the car doesn't seem to have been developed that much. This is going to be a long year for the Williams team, and I think with the new engine for Sauber and the extra investment from the Alfa Romeo branding, I can see Williams finishing last this season in the Constructors' Championship, and it pains me to say that, so it does. But that is it for this preview. I know it's me just been rabbiting on, but this is where you guys come in. Anyone listening to this, I want you to get involved. Comment below, what do you think is going to happen? Tell me who you think is going to be your champion. Who's going to win in Melbourne? I think Hamilton will win in Melbourne, but I think Vettel might sneak pole. There's my thoughts there. Tell me who's going to win the championships. Who's going to win at Melbourne? Who's going to be your surprise of the season? Who's going to be your disappointment for the season? Put it in the comments below. There will no doubt be another one of these further in the year. Maybe do some race reviews as the season goes on. Maybe do a mid-year review as well and see what's going on. I can hark back to some of your comments. So get involved below. You might just get a mention on a future video. But for now, all that's left to say is the Australian Grand Prix is this weekend. Hallelujah, it is back. We can enjoy F1 once again. My name is Andy. If you want to see more either from this kind of video or from the YouTube gaming stuff that I do subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button as well. Put those comments below. But until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Ta-ra.